Welcome to the Thornton Review.
The show designed with you in mind. If it's important to you, it's important to us.
Good evening, Mr. President. I'm John Frankman. I was a Special Forces Green Beret who was forced out of the military because of the COVID-19 vaccine
good
mandate.
Stuff, right? That's good. That's good.
So the Biden-Harris DoD COVID-19 vaccine mandate was very damaging to the military. It forced thousands of service members out, and thousands do not want to join now. The Biden-Harris DoD has the lowest recruiting in modern history, and now they're pushing more woke training. So how do you plan to repair the military from the damage that was done and hold military leaders accountable?
So I want to have them come back into the military with pay. And, you know, they've been talking about that, but it never happened. They never did what they said they were going to do. There should have never been a mandate. That should have never happened. You should have been given choice, as we say. We want choice in education, and we want a choice there, too. And that should have never happened. And, you know, we've lost some of our best people in the military, too. Did you leave? Did you leave? Did you ever take the vaccine or anything?
I never did, sir.
So you want a choice, yeah. And do you want it? Would you go back in if they were able to?
As long as there's accountability, potentially.
Yeah, no, there would be accountability, is right. We'll fire their asses. But we don't want to lose this guy. We want to get, he's central casting. We want to get him back in. Yeah, we're going to take care of it. I hope you do come back, or I hope you do very well outside, to be honest. Wherever you are, I just want you to do well. But we're going to get a lot of people coming back. They should have never had the mandate. The mandate was a big mistake, and they treated people terribly, terribly. Okay? Thank you very much. Great. You look great. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm Pueschel, Schneier, executive producer and manager of the Thornton Review. Thank you for tuning in. Today's show is about medical freedom and government overreach. During the COVID pandemic, many people lost their livelihoods, not only because of business shutdowns, but because they refused to get vaccinated. People were kicked out of the military, fired from hospitals and businesses, all because of an illegal and unethical mandate to be vaccinated. People have a God-given right to choose what we put into our bodies. We choose what medical procedures and medications we take. The government has no right to force anyone to take any medicine, vaccination, or medical procedure. Our guest on today's show is John Frankman, former Green Beret. He was forced out of the Army for refusing to take the COVID vaccination. John, first off, I want to thank you and commend you for all the work you're doing and for standing your ground and not getting vaccinated. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the work you've been doing ever since. Will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I am John Frankman. I was a Special Forces Green Beret assigned to 7th Special Forces Group who, through a series of kind of unfortunate events, was forced to the military. And since leaving the military, have just been involved in advocating for service members and others negatively impacted by the COVID shot mandate.
Okay, well, thank you. This is going to be an interesting discussion. I can't wait. First, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll begin our discussion with John about medical freedom and what it means for our rights as citizens. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that. Alpha Fence Company can install any type of fence. When you call and mention the Thornton Review, you'll receive a $100 discount on your fence. They also offer military discounts. Vinyl fence, wood fence, aluminum fence, chain link fence. If it has the word fence, Alpha Fence Company can do it. 850-586-8020. 850-586-8020. John Frankman is a former captain in the U.S. Army who served as a Green Beret assigned to the 7th Special Forces Group. In July of 2023, he was forced out of the Army after 8 years of active duty because of the COVID-19 vaccination mandate. Before going on active duty, John had spent 4 years in the Catholic seminary studying for the Archdiocese of Washington and the military archdiocese before discerning that God had different plans for him. He entered active duty as an infantry officer and completed the Infantry Basic Officer Leadership Course, Airborne School, and Ranger School. After serving as an infantry officer, he was selected to attend the Special Forces Qualification Course, where he also completed Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School and completed the Military Free Fall course. Of all his military accomplishments, John considers refusing the immoral and illegal COVID vaccination his proudest moment. Since leaving the Army, John has been heavily involved in advocating for service members who have been negatively impacted by the military COVID vaccine mandate and for the spiritual and political renewal of our country. He has been in many interviews, written op-eds, and has traveled to D.C. on multiple occasions to encourage Congress to take the appropriate steps to fix the military. He also has recently finished his master's degree in systematic theology. So, John, thanks again for coming on. I want to ask you about your experience with the COVID vaccine mandate in the Army. What was going through your brain? Can you tell me the steps and just the timeline of what happened with your whole ordeal?
Yeah, absolutely. So I arrived at 7th Special Forces Group in June of 2020, and COVID was already spreading, and we started seeing...
So you were new there in 2020. You
Yep.
just arrived there. Okay.
Yep, just arrived there. Took a team in September of 2020. And I took my team, great group of guys, really got to know them well. And we're critical thinkers. Special Forces Green Berets are actually assessed and selected for their critical thinking capabilities. They have psychological tests, they have IQ tests. And we're not just the type of people who are just supposed to follow every single order. Sometimes if we're told to do something, we ask why. And I just noted that I had a lot of good critical thinking, very experienced guys. And as we continued to talk about a lot of current events and issues, we knew the COVID shot was coming out. By that point in time, I think most of us had had COVID at some point in time. So we're getting into 2021 and the COVID shot is coming out. And before going into the military, I spent 4 years in the Catholic seminary. So my faith is extremely important to me. And one thing I knew is that these COVID shots, every single one that was made used aborted fetal cells, either in the testing or the production. So for me, that was enough to at least say, I'm going to at least wait until it's mandatory. I thought of it as remote material cooperation, something that I shouldn't just jump right into.
So you were thinking that you might consider it. It's
Right.
You didn't know, really.
I didn't know. I didn't really make my mind up until June of 2021. And it was a whole process of prayer and study. And we were also aware of the side effects. I think people who think that no one knew the side effects, might not have known the extent, but...
You might not even been... Were you thinking that there could be side effects?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
We were all considering that. We were considering that COVID has we have a 99% chance of surviving it. We're all extremely fit, very young, have natural immunity. By that point in time, we were convinced natural immunity was better for us than an actual vaccine or experimental drug.
Even though in the media they were telling us that we didn't have immunity because it's something new, and they were talking about herd immunity.
Right.
And
it just
I'd never
depends
heard
on
that term before.
it depends on what media you look into, right? So if you read Epic Times or maybe Breitbart or other kind of alternative news
they're going to be
sources,
more truthful.
They're going to be more truthful. So you just have to be kind of critically thinking and just how have we been taught science the whole time. So basically all of us have this kind of awareness that there could be negative medical side effects for it. Even if there aren't, it's an unknown and we're fairly healthy. And for me, there's the religious objection I have. So I'm a detachment commander, I'm a captain. That means I'm in charge of 11 other soldiers. And we have a voluntary kind of sign up to get the shot. And I noticed on the sheet when it had the schedule, I'm the only officer within my company of maybe 12 other officers who did not sign up to get it. So this is where kind of the career pressure comes in. So
how many people are in the company?
So, I mean, in a company, you might have like 100 or something like that.
Okay.
And the battalion might be, more like 500.
And 12 people out of 100 did not sign up for the shot.
Oh, no. What I'm saying is that as far as the officers, so you have officers and you have enlisted. Now, officers are put in more of the managerial leadership positions. Not that, NCOs, they're leaders as well. But you just kind of have that commissioning from the president to be in charge. And when you take the oath of office, you take the oath to obey the lawful orders, and lawful is key here,
Right.
of the officers who are in charge of you, who you're in the chain of command. So within the chain of command, basically kind of the upshot is that there's a kind of career pressure to conform.
Sure.
That your career really comes down to your evaluation, which is given by your senior rater, your battalion commander. And being the only officer who is taking an objection to this, who's not getting the shot, I'm kind of standing out like a sore thumb.
Right.
Now, I told my men that I will neither punish or reward you based on whether you get the shot, which was the actual policy, but they can do whatever they want. That's kind of their personal choice. And because of the pressure that was going on, I talked to legal assistants to find out, what am I legally required to do? What are my safeguards? What's the safeguards for my men, just to understand the law so that I can protect their own medical freedoms, their religious conscience rights, and their medical safety as well. Because at this point, I think when I had a conversation with my company commander, it was maybe a few months in, maybe March timeframe. He's like, hey, John, I know a lot of your team didn't get the shot. Did you get the shot? Like, well, no, I didn't get it. Well, why not? It's like, well, if you look at VAERS being the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, there had been maybe 3,000 deaths associated with the COVID shot by that point in time.
Boy, that wasn't in the news.
It's not in the news,
That
but
was
it's
not in the
available,
news.
and it's
Yeah.
run by the FDA, either the FDA or the CDC. So it's an official government site that tries to passively collect this information. And there's a report saying that potentially 100 times undercounted. So there's probably hundreds more people who have died from this than is known.
Than who died from COVID, maybe even. It seems like.
Potentially.
I wonder, yeah.
I don't know. I think that if we look at it, everything was associated with COVID. They were trying to count everything as a COVID death, and there was
Right.
incentives for hospitals to get more money based on that.
If you were in a car accident and you happened to have COVID at
Right.
the time, you died of COVID.
Exactly. But with
It
regards to the
doesn't
COVID
make sense.
shot, they were trying to undercount as many of
Sure.
the vaccine injuries. And I've talked to a ton of people within kind of my timeline of as far as these. But to kind of finish up sort of the whole experience is my team wasn't vaccinated. We started receiving pressure. My team sergeant was regularly bothered by the sergeant major, went into his office.
So your team did not want to get vaccinated?
They didn't want to get it until it was mandatory. And the reason being is that they wanted to have liability if they were injured. Knowing it was under experimental use authorization, they knew there was no liability. So if they were injured and they
And-
took it voluntarily,
Right.
then who would they be able to sue? So they wanted to at least wait until they were mandated by some commander to get it so they could point the finger at someone. And they also wanted to wait and see just what are the side effects of this? How is this going to play out in the long run?
Sure.
And we're hearing from people who are just feeling absolutely like trash after they get the shot, not saying major injuries, but just feeling just worse than when they had COVID, and it just doesn't make sense.
I knew some people like that too.
Right.
Who just felt drained and no energy for months and months and months after the shot. They just
Right.
felt different.
So we continue through the year. We have military freefall training out in Arizona in June of 2021. And First Special Forces Command comes out with a policy where you need the shot in order to deploy or in order to go overseas and travel. Well, my team had not gotten the shot at that point. We maybe had 2 guys who had it because they kind of transferred into the team. So I was given the choice, and I was talking to my commander, and he's like, John, you know, the shot's mandatory now for deployment. What is it going to be? Are you going to get the shot, or are you going to lose out on this trip? We had a 6-week deployment to a Central American country that did not require the COVID shot. And this is before the mandate came out.
And this is something that you wanted to do. That was a trip. That was a mission that you
Right.
wanted to be on.
It's devastating. So to kind of put it in context, Special Forces Green Berets go through a year or 2 of training, depending on how the pipeline is run.
And it's intensive, vigorous training.
Very, very vigorous. So there was a 3-week selection process. I did the math, and I think 30% of the people who went through selection got selected.
Wow.
You do small unit tactics training. You go through survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, where you're put in a prison camp. You're slapped in the face. They they put you through some intense training. Robin Sage is an exercise where
They make it as realistic as possible.
they try to, and they prepare us for just
For
very
war.
difficult for war and for just unconventional warfare. a very specialized form of warfare that a lot of the military doesn't know. And what I like to say as far as making Special Forces Green Berets, what's different than us than every other kind of special operations force is that we learn a language. We focus on a region. We work by, with, and through a partner force. So I had 6 months of Spanish training. Everybody else gets 6 months of some kind of language training depending on where they're regionally aligned. So to go through all of that training, to get ready to go to a Central American country, and then to have that taken from you, and this is after Afghanistan. So we had already had the botched withdrawal. And instead of having regular deployments, you are actually fighting for these 6-week, whatever long trips to different countries. So to have that taken from me, so it was just a series of just these unfortunate events where losing out on deployments. Then one story that I must share is that after we had the mission taken from us, we were put in some unwanted training in Louisiana. It's about 2 weeks long, but in order to risk mitigate for COVID, they had unvaccinated soldiers wear red wristbands and red tape.
Gee, wow.
Right.
Well, that kind of brings back memories that you read in books from
Absolutely.
the 1940s
Absolutely.
over in Germany.
A little bit, and one team saw the irony in
That's
it, and they actually
crazy.
made us gold stars, which, among guys, that's kind of a funny thing, but
Yeah.
but that is the absolute irony, and that's how on the face it was of
That's
treating vaccinated and
wild.
unvaccinated different. So, I mean, to get into more policies like that, let's say you got to the end of COVID right before the shot came out, you wouldn't have mask policies. People wouldn't have to wear masks. Now that the vaccine's available, let's have the unvaccinated wear masks. Now that the vaccine's available, let's make it so the unvaccinated can't use gym facilities, that they can't use dining facilities, that they can't leave ships to go to mass regularly. My story is much better than many others. And in fact, here's one story. There's someone at the 82nd Airborne is an infantry division. One of the battalions had the sergeant major stand in front of his unit, and he said, if you're vaccinated, you can go over there, you have the day off. If not, get your rucksack on. We're going for a long, grueling ruck march. So we're talking like 50, 70 pounds.
So punishment.
So reward and punishment, which you're not allowed to do. But commanders used every legal and illegal manner of trying to coerce people to get the shot. I heard before the Afghan withdrawal, you also had, for instance, like this general was going down to the company level and shaming individual soldiers for not getting it. General Donahue, I'll say his name out there. He was in charge of the 82nd, and he went down and just completely inappropriate use of the chain of command for that level of senior raider to try to pressure a soldier, but trying to shame them. Did you get the shot? So you're not deployable if you don't get the shot. You don't care about your men. What kind of leader are you? So this kind of tactic, and that's why we want accountability.
I'm sure he was saying it in a more gruff tone than what you're explaining also.
Oh, probably. Absolutely. So at any rate, we had the mission taken. Then I put my religious exemption in, which having the seminary experience, it's coming from a sincere place. I'm really trying to follow my conscience. And it was through prayer, through discernment that I kind of got to the position where, I'm at peace about not getting the shot. And part of it is just the absolute distaste and hatred I have for abortion, the abortion industry.
Sure.
I think if we look at where these shots come from, at the human embryo kidney 293 that's used, I mean, what does that imply? That the abortion took place when the kidney is developed, that there were 200 plus attempts at doing this.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
I don't want to be...
Everything about immunizations is disgusting. They contain mercury, thimerosal, formaldehyde. They're grown in petri dishes on monkey testicles. They can contain the aborted fetuses. It's disgusting. I've read a little bit on it.
Sure.
Because I decided not to have my son immunized for anything that, number one, there's certain diseases that cause you're either going to die or you're going to be permanently disabled. COVID isn't one of them. But no.
And that should be your choice. You should have that kind of medical freedom. That's an important thing. People should be able to have access to the truth, to the pros and the cons. And they should be able to have the freedom of doing what they want with their own body. Because if the government, the federal government especially, and not even elected officials, but bureaucratic agencies of people who we do not represent us are able to tell us what we can do, especially with our bodies, that's not America. I think that we have many existential crises affecting our country right now with the border, the economy, threat of World War III, but the crisis of our soul has to do with what happened during the mandates, because we were no longer a country by, of, and for the people, but just something for special interest groups and just top-down totalitarian restrictions.
Yeah. Well, it's all money driven. Obviously, they wanted to sell vaccines, so they created a virus to force vaccines. They thought everybody in the country would just go along and get it. But then also, just the normal, regular citizens turned it into a virtuous morality thing, where you're a bad person because don't you want to protect your grandmother?
Right. It was the propaganda. So the shot is called Comirnaty. It should have been called conformity because it was about conformity of thought.
What was it called?
Comirnaty. So if we get into the whole, just with
Comirnaty?
Comirnaty is the FDA approved version, but conformity is the joke I have.
Yeah,
It's about social conformity. It's not about your medical safety. It's about kind of shaming those others, and it's just a communist tactic.
It's virtuous. It's moral to get the shot. That's what the word on the street was.
Right. Absolutely.
And everybody was shaming people on social media. I'm on Facebook a lot.
Sure.
So everybody who didn't get the vaccine was shamed by those who conformed and wanted to get the vaccine and thought that everybody should get the vaccine. People just believed that you had to get the vaccine. And there's no truth to it. Like, what is the ultimate truth behind this vaccine? People just believed what they heard, and so they decided to get it, and they thought that everybody who didn't get it was bad.
And just to kind of highlight it, and you are talking from your own personal experience of what you saw outside the military. Those outside the military, it is so hard to comprehend what it was like for those within the military who didn't get the shot, because it's not just a career, it's a lifestyle. You are owned by the government to a great extent. Your leaders can dictate your happiness, sadness to such an extent, where you go. And
what you do from hour to hour and from day to day.
What you do. And having bogus formations for people who didn't get the shot.
I can understand being told where to go and what to do and what your job is. You signed up for the job, you're told what your job is, and then you go do it. But forcing something into your body is different. That's different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To force any type of medical procedure or any type of medicine, I don't care if it's good for you. If they're trying to force B12 shots on you, you have the right to say, no, I don't want the shot. I don't want the needle to go in my arm.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's good for me.
Well, there at least has to be, and I think that there's a huge
example.
difference between like COVID shots, other shots. I think we can say that this is a new experimental one that has not been FDA approved. That if you look at the actual order, it was illegal, and there's so many more problems with the COVID shot than other ones. And focus right now for me is the COVID shot. I'm definitely more skeptical of other shots, and my eyes are open to some extent on other things. But right now, if we look at that COVID shot right there. So to kind of take it back to sort of the experiences, the mission, the deployment was taken from us. The mandate comes out. We notice that there's no FDA-approved shot available. We bring that up to the group doctors. We all have to go talk to them, and we're saying there's Pfizer and there's Comirnaty. Comirnaty is the one that was FDA approved. Pfizer is still experimental use authorized. You're not offering us Comirnaty. You're offering us Pfizer. That is illegal. How do you explain that distinction? And the doctors say they are not lawyers. Okay, I bring up the medical exemption process. The military violated its own medical exemption policy because if you could show that you had natural immunity, if you've already had the disease and have the antibodies, that's grounds for medical exemption. I had 2 tests done through LabCorp showing that I had natural immunity, and the military did not care. And everyone just shrugged their shoulders and said, that's not the policy that was put out by Lloyd Austin. So what Lloyd Austin put out was an unlawful order because there was no FDA-approved drug available. Now, even if there were an FDA-approved drug available, you have military policies to go off of. You have grounds for religious exemption and you have grounds for medical exemption. And the medical exemption piece I just explained to you, the religious exemption piece. So my exemption, I put it in October of 2021. I did not hear a thing back. And it wasn't until January of 2023 when the mandate was rescinded that it just magically disappeared. And up until that point, everyone who put their exemption in, unless they were basically separated from the military, had their exemption denied. It was just a blanket denial where just a total violation of our First Amendment right, or just God-given right, which is actually, legislated in the First Amendment, but just our right to worship God, to love Him, serve Him, and also the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, where many people could have continued in their jobs without it being a great problem for the military. It wouldn't have been a great inconvenience. So I made the decision to leave after August of 22. We had a town hall. We had a 2-star general coming in, Major General Roberson, and he was just taking questions. And I got to the point, and it's, most of the leadership there, and I asked, "Sir, I'm John Frankman. I'm over in this battalion. 2 weeks ago, the CDC said there's no distinction between those who are vaccinated and those who are not. Yet we have 30 of us. We can't deploy. We can't travel. We can't move on to future duty assignments. And what more, I put my exemption in a year ago, and it hasn't been answered. So is there any conversation about getting rid of the vaccine mandate, and when are we going to get our exemptions back?" And he asked me if I've heard of Novavax, and I respond right away, "Yes, sir. That uses aborted fetal cells too." And then goes on to explain that he doesn't want to kick people out, but he will if he needs to. And that we should do what the Army tells us to do. So at that point, I'm like, why am I waiting around? Most people who got kicked out, a lot of people don't realize it. Most people who got kicked out did not get an honorable discharge. They got something less than an honorable discharge. That means that they didn't have all their GI benefits. They didn't get all their VA benefits. It affects their future employment, especially if it's through a federal agency, because they're just going to screen that and look at that. So it was just a total terrible thing. And the last thing I kind of lost out on, which is very ironic, is I had applied to teach at West Point, and I was accepted to teach philosophy and ethics at West Point, but I wasn't allowed to move because my exemption was processing. So this is what they did. They put our careers on ice. I'm not allowed to move while my exemption is getting worked out, so I have to kind of stay there. So I ended up leaving last summer, or summer of 2023, because I'm either, and that's why I say forced out. Was I kicked out? Not necessarily. Was I forced out? Yes, I lost out on deployments, on team time, on
Teaching
future,
at West
right,
Point?
teaching at
Wow,
West Point,
that
future
would've been
career
amazing.
opportunities.
Yeah.
I'm forever the not team player guy, which I love my unit. I give my leaders great respect for how they tried to help me to the extent they could. It was the Army-wide policy that really kind of screwed the career over. But let's say you were at a different unit. You are forever the not team player. You're not the yes man. You're not the guy who's climbing the ladder, which is the great problem. So left the Army last summer, and have, God has definitely helped use my experience to advocate for other service members since.
Okay, well, that is an amazing journey that you had to endure. So we're going to take a commercial break. I want to remind our viewers that the Thornton Review is a civic engagement show with a purpose to spread awareness by interviewing local elected officials, candidates, and professional leaders. This is information you won't get anywhere else. We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with John Frankman and medical freedom. There is no government-funded program that can guide a man's thoughts. Only God can do that.
For a reliable source of information you can always count on, watch the Thornton Review.
You can watch our program on Pensacola Urban Network, Praise TV on WBQP 12.1, WBQP 12.8 Sundays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m., WBQP Praise TV on Roku Television Network, or download Praise TV on Google Play Store or Amazon Fire. Our website, thethorntonreview.com, and our Facebook page, The Thornton Review Show. Spoken to Congress, you've spoken to President Trump, Congressman Gates personally. Can you tell us your journey? What have you done since leaving the Army?
Yeah, since leaving the Army, I was able to first publish an op-ed through the Floridian, and that was through the help of Representative Matt Gates' office. And after that got published on July 31st, I've done over 50 interviews, have written a few other op-eds, and have gone up to D.C. on the Hill multiple times to try to advocate for service members negatively impacted by the shot
What
mandate.
was that like?
It was
Can you tell us
interesting.
explain
Yeah,
the
sure. I mean,
process
the
and-
first time I went up there, I kind of went up blind.
Yeah.
Somebody who was also doing some advocacy invited me up on the Hill, and I just kind of went office to office, sort of looking for people who I thought would
So
be...
you actually went into the congressman's buildings,
Right.
like the office buildings, and you were going from
Yeah,
office
just
to office. Oh,
representative,
that's a good idea.
trying to figure out
Yeah.
which ones would probably be more likely to be helpful. And I had already established that relationship with Matt Gaetz. I actually met him back in 2021 when a lot of the shot nonsense was going on, and I let him know what was going on. I had written Representative Thomas Massey as well, so stopped by his
I love
office.
him, yeah.
Oh, he's
Both of
amazing.
them.
And he gave me like a private meeting the first time I went up to
That's
DC,
amazing,
and
yeah.
he's just awesome. And he saw through the BS immediately. I emailed him back in 2021 or his office and got a response. He read your letter, feels terrible about what's going on. And he tried to put legislation in to keep the mandate from ever happening. So he was just kind of on it early on.
Oh, yeah.
And is continuing to be a good advocate, even though he's not really within the Armed Services Committee group. So went up there. Then the second time I go up to DC after kind of getting my feet wet a little bit, understanding how things work a little bit more, was able to get a meeting with a couple offices from senators, some more offices from the representative side. And this is with their different staffers, and was able to kind of lay out what I saw as the problems with the mandate and solutions for the mandate. So what I laid out with regards to problems is that there were 8,600 service members that were kicked out of the military. This is people who were involuntarily discharged because they had their exemptions denied or they flat out refused and were forced out. And most of them got general discharges. Now, there was also probably tens of thousands, if not 100,000 service members that were forced out. And that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Within the first year of the mandate coming out, the total strength of the military went down 60,000.
Wow.
And, you know, that is close to when the Afghan withdrawal happened. How do you kind of relate all of it? And the statistics that they don't keep are often the ones that they don't want you to know. So they're not asking, did you leave because of the shot, right? But I think that this has had more of an impact on retention and recruiting than anything else, even more than DEI and other things of that nature. People worried about getting the shot, not wanting to get it. So we've had that. We've had an unknown number of vaccine injuries, and I've met a number of people who've had this kind of negative experience. For instance, one girl is 24 in the National Guard, Carolina Stancic. She's had 3 heart attacks, a stroke, has a pacemaker in. Chris Cuomo has had her on the show a few times, and that's just absolutely tragic. Another guy, Drew Outstanding, he has Guillain-Barré syndrome now and is more or less paralyzed. And then Sean Walters, who I met recently at a Gates rally in August, he's had other kind of problems. So
And are those military people that you're speaking of?
These are service members. So these are service members, veterans who got the shot. Some were mandated to get it and just have had these negative. And this is not something that's being greatly expressed, right? We had one friend of mine is a whistleblower, Ted Macy, and he went on in uniform on video, and he was reporting about the number of pilots that have had negative adverse reactions to the shot. So in going through this kind of meeting and talking to different offices, I try to highlight the problems. So having this readiness issue with people leaving, with retention issues, with recruitment issues, with unknown numbers of vaccine injuries, and then you go through that it was illegal, it was unlawful for the reasons we stated before. No FDA-approved shot being available, that they violated religious freedoms, that the medical policy was actually violated in itself. And now you are getting a morally weaker force. If you are forcing out the people who are critically thinking, who are trying to follow the law, who are trying to follow the Constitution. Why do I say follow the Constitution? Because you need to follow the laws that are...
First Amendment rights.
Right, First Amendment rights, only following legal orders, things of that nature. And if you aren't taking the time to really think through that, you're now just getting, I don't know, wherever the military was before COVID shot, and then after, we just have to say it's in a worse place now.
So you can look at how many young people had heart attacks prior to the vaccination. You can look at medical records and statistics. And you can kind of look and see how many people are having these types of health problems before the just to compare numbers. And then afterwards, you can look at the people who have had negative effects. You can look at their medical records, and the military accepted them. The military has full records of their medical procedures before they went in, and their medical issues and problems and whatever medications they had been on before they and during the military. So you can kind of prove
Right.
that when these issues started, and
Absolutely. But the DOD is
there's a common
obfuscating.
denominator.
Right, exactly. Like, where were we at? What happened in 2020 when it was just COVID and not the shot? What happened in 2021 when it's the COVID
how
shot?
many young men and women were having
Right.
heart attacks? And
Now, there's DMED data, that stands for Defense Medical Epidemiological Database. That database, some of that information has been obscured, and Senator Ron Johnson has
course,
been
yeah, because
just
they
a
don't want
hound
people
on
to
it.
know.
So on the Senate side, I have to thank Senator Ron Johnson the most for really aggressively approaching this, for the help that his staffers have lended me. But he was trying to dig into this, but he's just, a lot of these people are getting roadblocks. And Matt Gaetz, so I was very blessed to be his guest at the State of the Union. And him inviting me was not just him inviting me. He was doing it on behalf of all the service members who were negatively impacted by the shot mandate.
Right.
And I really appreciate him giving me the platform, because unfortunately,
Sure.
this is not something that a lot of representatives want to discuss. Whether it's big pharma money that's involved, whether it's people wanting to move forward, whether it's just the thought process that it's not something popular to run or get elected off of. I don't know. I don't know what reasons. But when I was up there, there was a hearing, and it was based off of a lot of Ted Macy's whistleblower report. And the witnesses were just Biden appointees, and they're just carrying his water. They're, I don't know that information. It's like, that's what we asked you to come back with. So it's just really unfortunate, and we're not getting down to the truth of it. So I appreciate all the efforts that he's putting in. And it's just unfortunate that, don't necessarily feel like he's getting as much help as he should.
Well, so what's in the future? Are you still going to Capitol Hill? Are you working on any bills? Or
So
what's
the
going
most
on?
recent thing is that I was able to meet President Trump, as you played in the video.
That's amazing.
And that was absolutely
That's
amazing.
amazing.
That was huge. That is.
Thank you for sharing that video with
No,
us.
absolutely. And God is so good, and I'm just so humbled that He is able to use me to try to advocate for those who are negatively impacted.
Absolutely.
Because, like I said, I think there were hundreds of thousands who were negatively impacted, whether they got it, didn't want to get it, even just forced against their will and are still in, whatever the case is, to be able to speak on behalf of that. And I appreciate everyone who's reached out to me, who've thanked me, who've told me their stories. I hear them, and I want to continue to fight for them. But to be able to talk to him, to ask him, what are you going to do to repair the military, and how are you going to hold leaders accountable? And for him to say that he's going to fire these leaders, that he wants to bring service members in with back pay. Now, I think it's going to take a bit more than that, right? And that's where I want to work with Congress, and I've made certain recommendations for him. I wrote an article in Gateway Pundit that's supposed to outline what needs to happen for Trump to really secure and fix the military.
Right, yeah, because it's going to have to go through Congress.
Yeah, the way executive orders work right now, I don't know.
Yeah,
Actually, not all of it. So another thing that I've been up to, and group that I signed a document called the Declaration of Military Accountability. And that's something that came out on January 1st of 2024 this year. And that document states that we're trying to hold military leaders accountable for the failures they've done. And there's kind of two ways that you can do that. One way is through legislative officials, for them to take away retirement pay from these military leaders who forced the shot, and to keep them from serving under senior executive service. And we've had some candidates who've signed the DMA, and we're going to continue to support them, and even had a joint fundraising campaign for them. And furthermore, what we want to urge the president to do is to appoint solid service secretaries who would be willing to court-martial these military leaders for the laws that they broke that were already on the books. How are you going to legislate more things saying you can't do it if they've already broken laws that are on the books? You have to hold them accountable for the laws that they broke now. And a court-martial isn't a conviction. It's just saying that we're going to lay out the evidence, we're going to allow you to present your defense, and you're just going to get the kind of just punishment for what you did or didn't do.
Okay.
So yeah, just those are some of the things that we would like to see President Trump do.
Yep. So you get your just punishment for what you did or didn't do, and then we change course, and there's no more vaccination mandates.
Right, and that's so the kind of three.
Has the vaccination mandate, has that been dissolved? Is that no
It's been
longer?
dissolved, but what I'm hearing from individuals, I just heard about someone who was kicked out for refusing the flu shot. So they're still kind of going after folks in different ways, right? So there is this kind of, oh man, these anti-vaxxers, these people who, and I wouldn't describe myself as an anti-vaxxer. This is one shot I didn't get for moral reasons, for medical concerns, and now because it was an illegal order.
Right.
So
because you're a critical thinker, and you could see why they were forcing it.
Right. Right. And I think there's just a lot of, like you said, kind of the money, if we look back into, and that's what I would have really liked to see when Fauci was up there, when he was in the hearing. Like, let's talk about how many lives are you responsible for taking through not offering preventative medicines, through saying certain drugs that were actually helpful or not helpful, and then pushing drugs that are not helpful, such as remdesivir, such as these breathing machines. So a lot of problems going on. I see what I have as a very small piece of the pie.
Was remdesivir, did a lot of people pass away who were given remdesivir?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
I don't have the details of it.
I have a friend
yeah.
that was in Baptist Hospital who said he didn't want it, but I think they gave it to him anyway, and he passed away.
That's unfortunate. And we hear about parents dying alone, and it's just absolutely inhumane. So there just needs to be kind of accountability. We need to go back and look at what happened within our country to ensure something like this doesn't happen again. Within the military, I think military leaders, they need to be held accountable. There also needs to be other steps for reparation. So honestly, most service members are not going to want to go back in because of how they're treated. Right. And furthermore, let's say I wanted to go back in.
Well, they've moved on, and they've probably found other livelihoods and other careers.
They've moved on, but they also are not on the same career trajectory they were on previously. So for me to go back in, I've lost out on team time, deployments, being able to teach at West Point. I talked to another captain. He reached out to me, and he was telling me how he was supposed to go to a college, an ROTC position near where his family lives. That was taken from him. He went from top 10%, most qualified, great OER, to being not qualified. Only thing that changed within 4 months or 6 months, he didn't get the COVID shot. So now he's seen as unfit for leadership. So having that kind of, and these records haven't changed. One guy, after I talked to Trump and asked him that question, came up to me and said, "Hey, I appreciate you asking that question. I still have a general officer memorandum of record on my record for not getting the shot. They haven't taken any of this adverse action out." And meanwhile, they're going on and they're expunging and clearing up the records of people who were forced out because of before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So if they're able to do it for that group, they should be able to do it for this group.
Sure.
And the Congress shouldn't be the ones that is telling them to do it. It should be the DOD itself trying to repair the damage. So I think when Trump, please God, comes back in, I think he needs to have those court martials, but he also needs to, when inviting service members back in, have some kind of a board process that's able to evaluate what career opportunities were taken from this individual, what schools, what rank, what positions, try to get that back to them. Because if you reward the people who violated the law, who were yes men, company men, and you punish the people who did the right thing, the military is going to be tilted to be more morally weak. So this is just one of these many processes. And, we have so much annual training. You know what we don't have annual training on? The Constitution. We all take an oath to support and defend the Constitution with our lives if necessary.
But some people may not have ever even read it.
Right. So in order to ensure that service members are kind of more motivated in order to fight for their country, be willing to die for this document, and also that they know their own personal rights, their own liberties, that they really just kind of take it in, I think there should be an annual training requirement on the Constitution for service members.
I do too. Absolutely. That's a good idea. We can work on that next.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what actions should Congress take if elected President Trump
So I mean,
to repair? I think you just covered that.
I covered that, but the other thing that Congress could do, and which I asked them to do in July, I sent a letter to every member of the House Armed Service Committee. And what they can do without any Democrat help whatsoever, if you have the majority in the House, you can hold whatever hearings you want. Now, what I've just described is a huge damaging thing that happened in the military, where we have potentially 100,000 service members less, recruiting issues like we've never had before in modern history, potential vaccine injuries.
Do you think the recruiting issues are due to the vaccine mandate?
I think it's definitely a part of it. Now, there's so many problems going on. I'm sure Afghanistan has a huge part to do with it.
Right.
I'm sure that DEI and what everybody's hearing, and I'm sure lack of confidence in Harris, in Walz, in Biden is going through everybody's minds. I think that if Trump comes back in and gets the military to do what it's supposed to do, which is to support and defend the Constitution, to keep our country safe, you're going to have a number of young men that are going to be more willing to join. But right now, lack of confidence in leadership through the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration, as well as through military leaders, they don't want to serve them. They don't trust them. That's why you need to kick out these bad apples. We need to just start at the top. Back in World War II, we had way less flag officers than we did, way less of these generals. However, the force was much larger. I think we need to get back to a leaner general officer corps, especially with the means of communication we have that are so much more instantaneous now. But at any rate, there's just so many reasons. But what Congress can do right now, having the majority power in the House, they can have a series of hearings right now on these issues. There have only been maybe 2 or 3 hearings on the COVID vaccine mandate in the military. I think that's unacceptable. Absolutely. There's so many things that haven't been covered. The lawfulness of the order, the religious exemption process, the potential for vaccine injuries. And I appreciate having those. The one that I heard before, but if you're just having people who are carrying Biden and Harris water and are just obfuscating the truth and trying to obscure any kind of information, you're not going to get to the bottom of it. But if you bring in people who, I have a list of witnesses who would be willing to testify, experts on this topic. Rob Greene, he wrote a book, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines, outlines all of these problems. You have Davis Yuntz, who's a lawyer who's defended many service members who were facing court-martials or getting kicked out of West Point, things of that nature for the vax mandate. So
are you talking about taking them up to Congress, going door to door like you were, and maybe getting meetings going? And
so the meetings at this point, I don't know. We need to get Trump in the White House is the big thing right now. What I would have liked to have seen Congress do, or maybe once after Trump gets elected, is to have a series of hearings on the COVID vax mandate in the military, to fully understand the effects of it, to fully understand the laws that were broken, the problems with it. And that's just going to be information for Trump to make the right decisions, for him and his service secretaries to make the right decisions to be able to address the problems. Unless you fully understand the problems, you can't address the problems. And Trump doesn't know what he doesn't know. Members of Congress don't know what they don't know. And right now, I'm kind of the opinion that a lot of them just don't fully understand the negative impact that this shot mandate has had within the military, and haven't taken the appropriate steps to really, fully ingrain it. And I appreciate everyone who I've interacted with, absolutely 100%. Yeah. I think that there could be a little bit more done, and I think they have the authority to do it with the majority in the House right now.
You just have to spread awareness to them.
And that's what I'm trying to do. And there's a million issues going on right now. And like I said,
your gentlemen that can speak on it also, who could spread awareness.
Right,
Are they kind of doing the same thing you're doing, or? I'm just curious.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Everybody has lives and things like that, right? I took a contracting job. I got to find a way to make money too. I'm not getting paid for this, and travel can be expensive. But I just think that God has put me in a position right now and opened doors for me, and has given me sort of that drive and desire that
so you're kind of leading the charge in Congress.
I wouldn't say I'm the only. Yeah, I think
you're getting a lot done. I think you are spreading awareness, and I hope that people are hearing you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And I think that being able to go and to speak to Trump was definitely a powerful thing. And I think there's a lot of people who do remember. And, after speaking with Trump, I saw him put out an insanely funny, comical political ad comparing his military to the military of Harris and Walz, and of Biden and Harris. And his military had Arlie Ermy, from the Full Metal Jacket, those scenes in boot camp, rough and tough. And then the other side, you had just the transed out soldiers. I was going to say, let's stick on this soldier. Oh, it's just absolutely insane. Crazy. And when I got to 7th group, one of my first superiors was a transgender officer. It's just, this is a Special Forces Green Beret, right? And
was it a woman that became?
It was a man who became a woman because this person had passed the Special Forces qualification course.
How many women pass it?
I've only heard of 2 so far.
And were they really men?
No, yeah. Right.
Seriously, though.
But
what are they thinking?
And
I mean,
it actually doesn't work with the mission, because if our mission is to work with partner forces, and especially if we're aligned to Central and South America, there's such a thing as machismo, and there's a certain cultural background that you have to respect of other people. Now, imagine trying to send somebody like that to a Middle Eastern country. It's kind of like you get to June Rainbow Month and everybody likes to go all super prided out, but you're not going to do that in Saudi Arabia. I know that.
Well, their mentality is if you accept them, they will accept you. So they're not even.
Why should I accept them when they can't even accept themselves? They can't even accept who they were, right?
Right.
Yeah, how God made them to be. But at that point with this individual, I was just the only person who didn't call him ma'am. I just went with rank and last name.
Sure.
The goal isn't to necessarily die on your sword, but it's to not violate your conscience. You have to not live by lies. That's a great book. I recommend everybody don't live by lies. But
you can't pretend that their reality is real.
Right. So
you can't give into it.
Yeah.
I like people who don't give in to false narratives and to things that aren't true and things that aren't real and things that are dangerous.
Yeah.
And things that are against our human rights.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, that's great. I appreciate you for that, for everything you're doing. It's great. So what other issues are you passionate about?
I am very passionate. I mean, there's just so much going on right now, but the pro-life issue. So although my main focus has been talking about the vaccine mandate, advocating for service members, here in Florida, we have Amendment 4, which is this terrible pro-abortion amendment, which is being funded by outside state people such as Soros and other Planned Parenthood, things of that nature. And they're trying to take away all restrictions from abortion, and they're using extremely vague language to do it. So, as a Christian, I believe life begins at conception, but not just because I'm a Christian, also because of just science.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that science shows us that moment of conception, that is a new genetic material. That the cells are multiplying. If we were looking for life in Mars and some other planet, we would count that as life. That is a human life.
You would look for cells multiplying.
You would look for cells multiplying, and now we have...
And that needs outsourced sources to sustain it, such as food and water.
Right, and we can... There's no essential difference between conception to birth. Everybody wants to make this 6-week mark, 15-week mark. But, and as Christians, we know and we understand from faith, but even if, let's say, you're not a person of faith, you should be against this Amendment 4. Why? Imagine that you're a dad, you get a call, and the person says, hey, I'm from Planned Parenthood and your daughter is here to get an abortion. It's like, what? No, let me talk to her. It's like, oh, you don't get to talk to her, and you don't even have a say in what happens because consent was taken away. I just have to notify you. You've been notified. We're performing the abortion in 5 minutes. Nothing you can do. Bye. That is what this amendment would do, and we'd be paying for it too. That's how it's looking in a lot of other states that have passed these super pro-abortion amendments. So we need Christians to get out there to vote against it, to tell their friends to vote against it. So that's definitely an issue that I'm concerned about.
Right. So as far as pro-life and abolitionist, that it's so political. So many people say it's never going to, even if this amendment was not on the ballot.
Right.
There's so many people that say there's no point in bringing it up. There's no point in trying to bring up a law to abolish abortion in Florida. Do you believe that?
I think that you have to... No, I mean, I think that the ultimate goal needs to be making abortion unthinkable, and that's much more of a cultural issue than a political issue. If you have over 50% of the culture thinking that a woman has the right to kill her own baby, well, there's some huge problems with that culture, right? But I mean, I would love to see, that as much limit to abortion as possible, because the basis of all of our rights is the ability to live. If you don't have the ability to live, you don't have the ability to do anything. So within Florida, first and foremost, we need to defeat this amendment, and I'm okay with the incremental change to try to protect life.
Okay.
Pro-lifers need to be able to kind of change, convince other people. They need to be able to get these wins within the state level, and if we can't get these wins in the state level, we're never going to get the wins on that national level, because politicians, above many other things, are pragmatic, and they're going to do what they need to do to get votes. So until we make it an important enough issue for the general populace that they come out and vote in troves. So all Christians, I urge you, go out, vote.
That's kind of a worldly view, I think. So I guess prayer and going in with an iron fist
Absolutely. You have to have both. You have to have a spiritual renewal for this country and a political renewal for this country. It's the faith and works. It's doing both. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming on. We could do a follow-up also, like maybe next year, after you do more work on this and see what's been resolved.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to do that. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been great hanging out, great talking to you. So
Absolutely. Thank you. The Thornton Review is on the air to provide public service awareness and intellectual infrastructure to our community. This show is made possible by Ida Gates Godly Teas LLC, Alpha Fence Company, and our guest, John Frankman, former Green Beret in the Army. It was a pleasure to have you on. Really appreciate you.
thank you.
We thank you for watching this episode of the Thornton Review. Bye-bye. You can watch our program on Pensacola Urban Network, Praise TV on WBQP 12.1, WBQP 12.8 Sundays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m., WBQP Praise TV on Roku Television Network, or download Praise TV on Google Play Store or Amazon Fire. Our website, thethorntonreview.com, and our Facebook page, The Thornton Review Show.